British Prime Minister Theresa May and her government are facing a no-confidence vote later today after lawmakers threw out her Brexit deal. It was the biggest, the most humiliating defeat in modern British history, and it casts even greater uncertainty over when, how, and even if Britain will withdraw from the European Union. Well, at the moment, the Prime Minister is taking her weekly questions in Parliament, but this time the stakes are high indeed. With me here in the studio, we are joined by DW Brexit analyst Alex Forrest-Whiting, who is going to talk with us in just a moment. But first, we are actually going to go to the live feed now, Alex, in the House of Commons, and then we'd like to get your reaction thereafter.
To put that date on the face of the fisheries bill.
I don't think that my right honourable former colleague will find that that is an accurate interpretation of the government's positions, and my colleagues, like the honourable gentleman for Bamford Buchan, has argued strongly for that case, and we will see what happens when the bill returns at report stage.
Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Charlie Elphick.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am sure that the whole House will join me in condemning the appalling attack in Nairobi and in sending my thoughts and prayers to all those who have lost loved ones. Our High Commissioner has confirmed one British fatality, and we're providing consular assistance to British nationals affected by the attack. We stand in solidarity with the government and people of Kenya and will continue to offer our support to meet the challenge to security and stability that is posed by terrorism in the region. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Charlie Elphick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I join with the Prime Minister in her strong condemnation of terror? You will know, Mr. Speaker, and the Prime Minister will know that I first sought election to this House because I believed in more jobs, lower taxes, a stronger economy, and more investment in the public services on which we all rely. And does she agree that since 2010, Conservative governments have delivered time and again for the British people? And the biggest threat to that is sat on the opposition front bench with a leader whose policies would mean less jobs, higher taxes, a weaker economy and less investment in our public services.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. What have we seen under the Conservatives in government? We've seen 3.4 million more jobs. That's more people earning an income, earning a wage, able to provide for their families. We've seen more children in good and outstanding schools, more money into our National Health Service. What would put that in danger? A government led by the right honourable gentleman, more borrowing, more taxes, more spending, fewer jobs.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. May I start by correcting the record? Last night, I suggested this was the largest government defeat since the 1920s. I would not wish to be accused of misleading the House, because I've since been informed that is, in fact, the largest ever defeat for a government in the history of our democracy. So, Mr. Speaker, shortly after the Prime Minister made her point of order last night, her spokesperson suggested the government had ruled out any form of customs union with the European Union as part of her reaching out exercise. Can the Prime Minister confirm that's the case?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that the exercise that I indicated last night is, as I said, about listening to the views of the House, about wanting to understand the views of parliamentarians so that we can identify what could command the support of this House and deliver on the referendum. And what the government wants to do is, first of all, to ensure that we deliver on the result of the referendum. That's leaving the European Union. And we want to do it in a way that ensures we respect the votes of those who voted to leave in that referendum. That means ending free movement. It means getting a fairer deal for farmers and fishermen. It means opening up new opportunities to trade with the rest of the world. And it means keeping good ties with our neighbours in Europe.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, my question was about...
You're watching Questions there in the British House of Commons to Theresa May on what is another historic day for Britain. We are joined by our correspondent, Alex Forrest-Whiting. What do you make of what we've seen so far?
Well, the very first question that was put to her was by one of her own backbenchers, Charlie Elphicke, who is basically giving her an opportunity to say the Conservative government is still the best government to have in place and we have done the most for the country, and that is because the government is going to be facing a no-confidence vote later today, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we had Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, that's the main opposition party, again saying, you know, really... trying to make it even more difficult for Theresa May. This was not just the worst defeat in almost 100 years for a government. This was the worst defeat, the largest government defeat in the history of democracy in the UK, and making it very clear that, you know, what is she going to do next? The Labour Party would like the UK to stay in a permanent customs union. Theresa May does not want that to happen, and certainly those Brexiteers do not want that to happen.
And given all of this going back and forth here, I mean, it's an extremely difficult day for Theresa May, for Britain, for Brexit.
It's a very difficult day for Theresa May. She's got to get through half an hour of being questioned by MPs in Parliament yet again. Then, because of this no-confidence vote that's going to happen later today, MPs are going to be given a few hours in Parliament to debate whether there is confidence in the government, and that will be Labour and the other opposition parties trying to make it as difficult as possible for Theresa May.
But it's looking like she might win it.
It is looking like she may well win it, indeed.
But let's get some more on what could perhaps be a worst-case scenario, though. Get some details into this, because if she, on the other hand, loses the confidence vote, it could trigger a general election and fresh chaos for the acrimonious Brexit process. But not everyone in London seems afraid of that. Have a listen.
132.
For Remain supporters gathered outside the British Parliament, Theresa May's humiliation was a sign of hope. Defeat for the Prime Minister's Brexit deal could open the door to a so-called people's vote, a second referendum on EU membership.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
Despite her resounding defeat, Theresa May says she is determined to deliver Brexit to the British people. But even some within her own party believe a second referendum is now the only option.
Parliamentarians do have some duties, and one of them is to prevent people from committing national suicide. A no-deal Brexit does that and cannot address the issues that we have.
First, May faces a no-confidence vote in her government. The rebels within her party have signalled that they will back her.
Her position is secure unless the very precisely worded motion tomorrow goes through, which seems very unlikely. She emphasised that she'd come in to deliver Brexit and that that was what she was going to do.
Such faith is in short supply in today's British newspapers, and the Labour Mayor of London, a city that voted overwhelmingly against Brexit, also added his weight to calls for a fresh referendum.
Surely the best option is to give the British public a say for the first time on whether they accept the Prime Minister's deal with the option of remaining in the EU. There's no need for this panic.
But for some, panic is clearly beginning to set in. Business is booming at this English storage firm, with companies stockpiling goods in fear of a no-deal-inspired catastrophe in just over 2 months' time.
And that's really the point. I mean, it's in just over 2 months' time, Alex, that Brexit is scheduled to take place. If May does win this no-confidence vote today, what happens next?
So she then has, as she said just there, we heard earlier that she is listening to the House. So she's reaching out to parliamentarians in the House of Commons to try to find a consensus within Parliament that people can agree to. But she still said, by delivering the result of the referendum from 2016, which is that the UK will leave the EU. Now, already one of her spokespeople has said that they do not want to delay Brexit. There was talk about extending Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which will give the UK a little bit longer to try to sort itself out. She's saying, they've said again, they don't want that to happen. However, the EU itself has said that is an option if the UK would like to take it. So she's got to try and reach out to parliamentarians. She has to come back to Parliament on Monday with a plan B. And the big question is, what is her plan B going to be, given how difficult it is within Parliament to reach any consensus? You have those who want to leave, those who are willing to leave on a no deal, and those who want a second referendum.
And how the EU also might react to that. We had some reaction, some initial gauging of that from the German Chancellor herself, Angela Merkel, a short while ago. I just want to play what she said and then get your reaction to it. Let's have a listen.
I deeply regret the fact that the House of Commons has rejected the agreement on Britain's departure from the EU. We believe it is now up to the British side to say what happens next, as the Prime Minister has announced he will. We want to keep the damage, which will inevitably follow from Brexit, as small as possible. That is why we will continue to seek an orderly solution. We still have time to negotiate, but we will wait to see what the Prime Minister proposes.
We have time to negotiate. That's interesting.
It is interesting.
The clock is ticking.
There are 10 weeks left. So, but clearly that is an olive branch to Theresa May and to the UK to say that, look, we are listening. What more can we do? However, do not forget that so far the EU is standing resolute that they will not reopen that withdrawal agreement. That was agreed back in November. That is their binding agreement, that is legally binding, 585 pages. They don't want to reopen it, and that is what has upset many Brexiteers because they want significant changes to it. What they can perhaps do is offer some more in this political declaration, particularly over Northern Ireland, to try to prevent a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland ever returning, and that is a big threat because of Brexit. So there we hear it, Angela Merkel saying that they will listen, they will do what they can, but really it has to come down to Theresa May, it has to come down to Parliament. What does the UK want? What does Parliament want? And as I said before, there is no consensus.
You know British politics so well, Alex. I mean, if you had to go out on a limb here, what do you expect to happen in the coming days, in the coming weeks in Britain?
I think that we're going to see Parliament MPs take more control. There's already plans afoot on Monday to try to force the government into allowing parliamentarians to take more control. They're going to say to the government, you've got 3 weeks to come up with another plan. If you don't, then it's going to come down to the very senior MPs, those who head up various departments within Parliament, to try to reach a consensus. And those heads of those committees, you have Brexiteers, you have those who want a second referendum. So they're hoping that maybe they can come to some agreement. I think we are possibly heading more towards a softer Brexit. I mean, there is obviously still a very real threat that the UK leaves with no deal, but I think Parliament doesn't want that to happen. We could be heading towards a softer Brexit, or maybe, just maybe, a second referendum if the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn decide that is the route that they will go down. At the moment, it is not.
It seems as if all options are still on the table.
They still are.
Alex, Forest Fighting, I think we've seen it all. We appreciate your analysis.